this, because we should let the YouTube Live people join as well. It would be nice. They would appreciate it if I started services too. And so let's begin with a little bit of singing. Yai, lai, 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 ya, la, la, ya, la, 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 ya, la, la, ya, ya, la, 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 ya, la, 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 ya, la, la, ya, la, la, ya, la, la. That's not what I meant to do. Ya, la, ya, la, 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 ya, la, la, ya, la, 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 ya. This one. Ya la ya la ya la 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 ya la la ya la la ya la la la. Let's see if that worked. Shalom Aleichem Malachei Hasharetz Malachei Elyon Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Bohem Shalom Malachei, page 13. Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu Nile Shalom Malachei HaShalom Malachei Mi Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedechem Shalom Malachei HaShalom Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Page 41, and I want to invite you, if you are here online, to take a second and introduce yourself in the chat, share who you are and where you're zooming in from. If you are here at Or Hadash, take a second and just say Shabbat Shalom to somebody. Maybe, hopefully, someone that you haven't seen in quite some time. Because next we turn to Lecha Dodi on page 41 as we greet. No, you sit there. Thank you. And as we greet the Shabbat bride, we also have to greet one another. Kabbalat Shabbat, the greeting of this 25-hour oasis in time, is a beautiful thing to do in a vacuum, but it's an even better thing to do in community. And so we join for a little Kabbalat Panim, greeting one another's faces, the faces of community, however, wherever, across time zones, whenever we gather together, we are indeed together. Lecha dodi likrat kalai ananai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kalai ananai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor bezachor bedibur echad hishmianu el hameyuchad ayay Adonai echad ushemo echad l'shemu tiferet ve'elitchila lecha dodi likrat kalai ananai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kalai ananai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Page 43, likrat Shabbat lechu v'neilcha ki mikor ha'beracha ay 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 merosh mikedem nesucha sof ma'aseh b'machshava techila. Lecha dodi likrat kalai ananai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kalai ananai 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Top of page 45. Hitoreri hitoreri ki ba'orech kumi uri ay 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 uri כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה, לך דודי לקראת גלה, ינני, 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 פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת גלה, ינני, 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 פני שבת נקבלה. Top of page 47, ימין ושמאל תפרוצי את אדוני תעריצי, אל ידיש בין פרצי ונשמחה ונגילה. לך דודי לקראת גלה, ינני, 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 פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת גלה, ינני, 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 פני שבת נקבלה. We rise in spirit or in body as we face the entrance to our living rooms, our dining rooms, our dens, our sanctuary, to welcome the Shabbat bride. And notice that as we face outward towards the entrances of our rooms, we are also facing outward towards one another. Boi v'shalom ateret bala, gam besimcha uvetzochola, ay ay ay, toch emunei am segula, boi chala, boi chala. Lecha dodi likrat gala, yananai, 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat gala, yananai, 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 pnei Shabbat nekabela. Page 57, we remain in exactly this position. And we turn to page 57 for the Baruch Hu. As we bless the source of life, so we are blessed. As we bless the source of life, so we are blessed. And the blessing gives us strength and makes our vision clear. And the blessing gives us peace and the courage to dare. As we bless the source of life, so we are blessed. Baruch hu et Adonai hamevorach. Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam va'ed. We can be seated. Baruch Adonai Elohim melech haolam asher bi'ro ma'ariv aravim b'chokhmah poteach sharim u'bikudah mishaneh yitim. Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdil ben yom uben laila, Adonai tzvaot shemo, El chai v'kayam. Thank you. Tamidim lo chaleinu le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai, hamariv aravim. Page 61. Hey, Janet Karp, do you have a siddur handy? And do you want to go ahead and read the interpretive version of Ahavat Olam on page 61? Do you have a siddur handy?
Yes,
and do you want to go ahead and read the interpretive version of Ahavat Olam on page 61? Janet, also, if you have your, does somebody have their YouTube also open? You have a siddur handy,
yes,
and you want to go ahead and read the interpretive version of Ahavat Olam. It's not me. Hey, Janet.
Yes.
Do you also have the YouTube link open?
I just closed it. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. I didn't realize.
No, it's all good.
We are loved by an unending love. We are embraced by arms that find us even when we are hidden from ourselves. We are touched by fingers that soothe us even when we are too proud for soothing. We are counseled by voices that guide us even when we are too embittered to hear. We are loved by an unending love. We are supported by hands that uplift us even in the midst of a fall. We are urged on by eyes that meet us even when we are too weak for meeting. We are loved by an unending love. Embraced, touched, soothed, and counseled, ours are the arms, the fingers, the voices. Ours are the hands, the eyes, the smiles. We are loved by an unending love. Blessed are you, beloved one, who loves your people Israel.
Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael. Page 65, the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בהם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Adonai Elohechem Emet. Page 77 and 79. Micha umalchuto beratzon kiblu alehem Moshe uMiriam uvnei Yisrael lechanu shira b'simcha rabah ve'ameru chulam. Micha mocha, micha mocha, micha mocha, micha mocha, micha mocha, micha mocha, ba'elim Adonai. Micha mocha, micha mocha, micha mocha, micha mocha, micha mocha, micha mocha, nedar b'kodesh. Nora tehilot Hosei Fele Nora tehilot Hosei Fele Malchutecha Ra'u vanecha bokei hayam Lifnei Moshe ze'eli anu ve'ameru Adonai Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed v'na'bar kifad Adonai et Yaakov u'galo mi'ed chazak mimenu Baruch atah Adonai gal Yisrael. Let's read together below the line on page 83. Everyone, all together. At the very bottom. When fears multiply and danger threatens, when sickness comes and death confronts us, it is God's blessing of shalom that sustains us and upholds us, lightening our burden, dispelling our worry, restoring our strength, renewing our hope, reviving us. Page 85. You rise in spirit or in body for Vishamru. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit olam. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat le'dorotam berit. Much better. Beini u'bein b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam, oti le'olam. oti leolam veshamru v'nei Yisrael et Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם וביום השביעי שבת וינפש שבת וינפש ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. We take a few minutes as we turn to page 91 to the beginning of the liturgy of the Shabbat evening Amidah, recited silently in the evenings, or perhaps to page 89, the visual Shiviti meditation, or perhaps to one of the pages subsequent to the Amidah where different guided meditations appear, or perhaps to some of the poetry in the back of the book or the commentary below or around the lines as we make our way through this silent evening prayer at our own pace and in our own way. Shalom, 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 shalom. Turn to our Mishaberach L'cholim, our prayer for healing and wholeness. And I want to invite you to share if there's someone you're thinking of tonight who's in need of some healing. I want you to take a second and mention their names between the two verses of our prayer and song. I believe the words can be found on the back inside cover of your Siddur. Mishaberach Abotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Oh, I saw that. And we're thinking of and sending our hope and our energy for healing and wholeness to Doug Proudman, Rob Johnson, Jules Mermelstein. to Andrea Abrams Herbert, James Alberts, Fran Anderson, Roberta Archibald, David Ash, Arden Berry and Carol Mueller-Bell, Rabbi Deborah Bowen, Robin Kupo, Frankie Deaver, Faye Fishman, Marcy Fish, Joan Flaherty, Rhoda Gansler, Eric Gershman, Jonathan Giannini, Cordula Hamish, Chava Hurley, Sharon Cass, Moss Kaufman, Beverly and Howard Kaufman, Fran Kaufman, Richard Krasin, Rabbi Joy Layden, Elsie Lieberstein, Robert Mueller, Toby Mackler, Anthony Nero, Lisa Nicholson, Jennifer Riley and Thomas Pablo, Stan Pollack, Abby Rosenberg, Mike Rosenberg, Shelley Sanders, Berta Schwartz, Marlene Sortino, Lloyd Suter, Howard Temple, Lynn Van Engel, Brandy Wozliewski, Stan Wexstein, Millie Weissman, Grace Zangwill, and Eileen Zeff, and Lynn Wilf, Patrick Gibson, Shlomo Ben Avram Vachaya, Bertha Schwartz, and Dan Paulette. And Fran Anderson. Mi sheberach imotenu mekor habracha le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. Hey, Kiddush helper, will you please come with me to help me with Kiddush? Thank you. You look like you need a job right now. Yes, will you please hold this with 2 hands? Oh, goody. So we're going to read together a reading prepared by Hayes for Refugee Shabbat. We'll move into our Refugee Shabbat program immediately following our service. And as we lift this cup, we read together. We lift this cup with words remembering our ancestors' exodus from Egypt on our lips. Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim. Where are you going, Kiddush helper? As we recall that ancient journey from slavery to freedom, we think also of the many times throughout history that our people have wandered in search of safety. From Tsarist Russia to the horrors of the Holocaust, to persecution in Iran, the former Soviet Union, Cuba, Ethiopia, and beyond. Time and again, we have found ourselves forced out of our homelands for being who we are. But each time we were held together by community and assisted by those who risked their safety and protection of ours. We continued to survive against all odds as our hearts grew to hold others who would come to experience what we had. We fill our Kiddush cup to overflowing, hoping that the joy of Shabbat will spread into the week to come. And so it is as we welcome refugees and asylum seekers into our communities today. Recalling the exodus from Egypt, the Torah tells us, "You know the soul of the stranger." While our responsibility to protect the rights of refugees and asylum seekers does not derive from our experience in Egypt, that experience does amplify our obligation to welcome. May our commitment to welcome fill to overflow just as our Kiddush cup does, leading us to take bold action in support of refugees and asylum seekers from every corner of the earth. Just as the Jewish people have thrived, so too do today's refugees of all faiths and ethnicities thrive as they rebuild their lives and become part of new communities. We lift this cup with words remembering the ingenuity of creation on our lips. Zikaron Lemase Bereshit. We continue creating and repairing the world as we build our communities on the collective strength of each individual, remembering that we are stronger and strongest when we come together. Savri Chavirai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. We rise in spirit or in body for Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'teit gedula leotzer bereshit, shenatan lanu Torah hatemet, v'chayei olam nata b'tocheinu, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei melech, malchei hamlachim, nope, hakadosh baruch hu, Shem l'dei shemayim v'sadaretz v'shem. Kakatuv b'toratecha Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed v'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz v'yom ha'hu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. We can be seated. And we don't trip over small people's chairs. And we turn together to page 131 for Mourner's Kaddish, and we turn in our hearts and our memories to those whom we've loved and lost. In this season, in years past, we mark the yortzites of Lorna Heinstein, grandmother of Len Zangwill, Sarah Hyman's grandmother of Stephanie Zangwill, the first yortzite of David Raisman, husband of Lucy Raisman, Rosemary Markovitz, mother of Max Markovitz, Rita Alberts, mother of Robert Goldberg Alberts, Carol Sicherman, mother of Sue Rosenthal, Norman Myers, father of Amy Gwartzman, Rose Burns, mother of Stephen Burns, Evelyn Sachs, mother-in-law of Amy Gross, Danny Shern, brother of Rabbi Vivian, George Snell, father of Jill Snell, Harold Brown, uncle of Meryl Stern, Hyman Heimowitz, father of Bernie Miller Heimowitz, and Joy Pollock, and Jay Pollock, late husband of Joy Pollock. And also we note that Doris, that we're still in a period of Shloshim for Doris Krieger-Vine, mother of Marlene Ross, who marks the end of Shloshim later this week. So I want to invite mourners and those observing a yortzite to rise on page 131 for Mourner's Kaddish, along with those whose tradition it is to rise for Mourner's Kaddish. And I need Bina to have a seat on a chair and not stand back up. Bina, no, excuse me. No, you're not. Please sit on this chair and do not stand back up. Thank you. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Be'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam lalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitchomam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tush bechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabbah min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru. Amen. You can be seated. Zichronam livracha. May their memories be for a blessing. It is my pleasure to introduce and call forward Elisa Belzer. No? Are you helping to facilitate with the Sado chairs? No, I am just going to call forward Vivian Kane and Shelley Sanders, who is on Zoom, our co-chairs of Social Action Tikkun Olam, as we say Shabbat Shalom to one another and transition from our service into our wonderful panel for Refugee Shabbat. And I am just thrilled to be literally passing off the baton to Vivian to bring us into this evening's program and discussion. Shabbat Shalom. And Bina, come join me. Nope, right now. Yes, but make sure that they are on. Let me just make sure that that is the case. Ah, indeed, that is on. And, look, so is that one. Lovely.
So tonight,
Come join me.
Refugee Shabbat, unfortunately,
For 1 second,
two
please.
speakers, and I'll introduce the first speaker in just a moment. I just wanted to say a word about the 2 drives that we have going for refugees. We have a drive for Highest Pennsylvania, and the information on that is in the Hakesh newsletter. And then we just have a recently announced drive for the Ukrainian refugees. That was announced in a congregational email that came out yesterday afternoon. So back in your email, you can find that. And that will have listed all the things that they're looking for. They're looking for specific things, medical supplies and that sort of thing, diapers, just a whole mixture of things, but not clothing. You really have to look at the list. And we can collect it here, or for the Ukrainian drive, we can actually deliver it directly to the Ukrainian church in Lansdale. So I'd like to introduce Matilda Isata Sawi, our first speaker. She's from the Refugee Congress. She's the Pennsylvania delegate to what is called Refugee Congress. She's a former refugee originally from Liberia. Matilda has had a lifelong commitment to public health and outreach. While in the refugee camp, she volunteered as a peer educator, teaching her peers how to prevent sexually transmitted infections and unplanned pregnancy. When she came to the US, Matilda earned an associate degree in applied sciences and a Bachelor of Science in public health from Temple University, all while maintaining 2 jobs, caring for her family in her country of origin, and dedicating her time to volunteer. She is passionate about her work as a storyteller, raising awareness about domestic violence against women, rape, climate change, and refugee, asylum seeker, and immigrant rights, including access to health care and other social services. Matilda has worked as an HIV/AIDS medical case manager. Today, she works as a TB screening coordinator in the public health system. She coordinates TB screening and treatments as per the CDC's classification for refugees and immigrants. Additionally, she is completing a master's in public health at Westchester University. And she worked in her community as a census taker for the 2020 census. And I'm just going to read a quote that by Matilda. My experiences throughout childhood and adolescence helped shape my dedication to my community and ignited my passion for using my struggles and telling my story to help other people to find their way and heal through life. It's my pleasure to introduce Matilda Sawi.
No, the one that she's wearing on her hat. No, but maybe just for this part is in the one. Speaking to the one.
Yeah, I don't know whether one is for one thing and one is for
No.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Well, it's not going to face two.
Hello, is that better?
Check there.
Hello. Hi, everybody. to change the microphone.
In the second one, we're getting an echo, is that enough?
That's possible.
Yeah, that's good.
Try it again.
Hello? Can you hear me?
I have a better idea. Wired. Let's change to wired, shall we? Change to wired. Let's try that.
Hello? Is that better? Hi, everybody. Vivian already did an introduction. And again, I'm Matilda Sawi, Matilda Isata Sawi from Liberia. I'm a former refugee. Is that better? Okay, this. Thank you. Thank you, Hayes, for this invitation. And I feel so privileged to be here today, telling just a little bit of my story as a former refugee, and so also inspire your stakeholders and across the country, the value that refugees have contributed to this society. Before I start, I want to know how many of you read or tell bedtime stories to your children or to your child. Okay. Online. Great. So growing up, my mother or my grandmother always told us the stories about Spider-Man, told us story about a wise woman, a wise man is in the forest or before going to bed. So imagine you telling your child or your children a bedtime story and giving them or giving her or him good night kisses. The child will fall asleep thinking about the next chapter in the story. Perhaps the child will even dream of being the character in the book. Imagine this child waking up the next morning, instead of an alarm clock waking her or him up, as usual, excitedly tell the dream to his or her parents. Now, this child is being wakened by the gunshots or bomb flying over their roof. The parents now in the house, confused, finding place to hide or to escape because their life is in danger. After that day, they will, or they might not ever seen again, or they might never get reunited again as family. Because anybody could get killed trying to escape the war. That is how many Liberian children and I started our joining in the civil war in Liberia. Destruction of life and property was the order of the day. People were targeted because of their political affiliation or ethnic group. Underage children were taken away from the children to serve as child soldiers. Children, underage female children were raped or being taken as child marriage. Children committed atrocity without their conscience. People were forced to leave and seek refuge in the neighboring countries, Guinea, Ivory Coast, Sierra Leone. And some found their way around other parts of the world, including United States, through the help of United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Why am I telling you this story? My family and I were never fortunate to come on a resettlement. We're never fortunate to get resettled as refugees living in a refugee camp in Guinea. I got fortunate to win the diversity lottery, and I was sponsored by my aunt, and I came to the United States in 2007. The reason why I'm telling you this story is for you to understand that it is important to look beyond just the labor of refugees or asylum seekers. We are people who were living normally in our countries with peaceful and happy life. Then we had to flee for our lives, leave everything behind us, as we see today in Ukraine. It is not just Ukraine, though. This issue is not just it's just not unique to Ukraine only. It is happening in other countries. South Sudan, Cameroon, Congo, some part of Middle East, Ethiopia, and so on. People are leaving, as we speak, people are leaving their homelands because their lives are in danger. We need to look beyond the labor of refugees. Instead, we need to look at the quality of the people with potential, who have brought the potential that people have brought into this country, into the American society. Statistic from the Refugee Advocacy Lab says that Pennsylvania is the home. So 8,093,167 foreign bonds, and that including myself. And that is 7% of the state population. If that increased about 75% between 2000 to 2019. Imagine that. Immigrants business owner generates more than 1 billion revenue in our state economy. The spending power of immigrant community increased by 24.9 billion. There are many other success stories, including myself. There are many other success stories of refugees and immigrants in the state of Pennsylvania and across the nation, including myself sitting before you here. That shows that immigrants and refugees are coming here in the United States or in Pennsylvania with dreams. They come here with dreams. I came here with dreams. And when they come, they push forward for their dreams. We do not play. We come with a dream and we push forward for it. As Vivian told you my story, she just told you a piece of my story. I worked 2 jobs, supporting myself here and supporting my family back home. And I never gave up. I never took a semester off. And as I speak to you today, I still going to school full-time, master's degree in public health. And I'm still doing full-time job and I'm doing my advocacy job at the same time. That is why we need to talk about things that need to be improved in the immigrants and refugee community. We need to talk with our legislators about how, as a state, to improve the services that's being given to refugees and immigrants and immigrant population, to improve, to help them succeed in the US. Legislation to support asylum seekers. There are things for asylum seekers who are coming, the same thing with asylum seekers who are coming to the country. Why do you think somebody going to leave their country to come to the United States? And my grandmother once told us that if you see someone running behind, and if you see someone running from their house, either something is running behind them or they're running behind something. There's no reason why someone should just get up one morning and just pack up and leave. It's something, and something might be the cause. And that could be either political issues, cultural issues, or religious issues, social issues. Or they're probably live in a country because they are tired. They want to seek for better life or better opportunity for their children. That is why as a country, as a state, we have to give them the opportunity to embrace them, to give them an open arm and welcome them. We cannot push them back. There's a reason why they left, like I told you. How can you push me back? If I ran into the synagogue today, running with nothing in my hands at all, will you push me out? Will you tell me no matter? We gotta think about the safety. The labor of refugees or asylum seekers. Look at when. I want you to look at the labor of refugees or asylum seekers as when you went to the store or when you go to the grocery store to buy food. The tag is a labor based on the item, on the food item. But you still look at the price, right? And the tag on the food. And you also look at the ingredients. And you get the food because you value the nutritional benefits of that food. That's the same with us. Do not look at the labor of being refugees. See us as people who bring in quality into the society. Look at our quality, the value. I'm not only working for immigrant population, but I have worked with the entire Pennsylvania population. My life has affected so many American citizens, every race, And that include, I have so many friends who have done the same, who are doing the same. There are several ways you can do this. Advocates for law that give us the support we need as immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers. For example, the Pennsylvania Medicaid law prevents immigrants, lawful permanent residents, from getting Medicaid, especially the adults. I want to be very specific. This is for adults. It prevents them from getting Medicaid. It put them on the waiting period for 5 years. And that law says that you gotta wait for 5 years period before you get qualified for Medicaid. And I said to the Lord, I want you to look into this, Lord. That is preventing our adult populations from seeking care. That also preventing immigrant population from getting preconceptions care. I'm speaking on a public health perspective as a public health professional. And for those who are undocumented immigrants, women, even when they get pregnant, they do not get Medicaid. They are not covered under Medicaid. I work in a health center for over 2 years. And I saw how many undocumented immigrants, pregnant women who came to the health center at a very late age of their pregnancy. Some started getting prenatal care in the second trimesters, third trimesters, because they cannot afford the cost. The community health centers, especially in Pennsylvania here, where I know Delaware County and Philadelphia, they are really trying their best. They provide the best services they can for them. Provide sliding scale for them, but that's still not sufficient. We have to do something about it as a state. Recently, there have been a bill to reduce in the Pennsylvania legislation to create Office of New Pennsylvanian. We have to think about that. Although the bill may not move forward this year, it's important to step that it was introduced. This will provide the support refugees and immigrants need. Another way we can do this is refugees and immigrants need to be supported for credentials that they brought from home. We want to create, or if we want to create more. To create more welcoming environment for refugees. That's something we have to think about as a state. And if we also want to break the barriers in healthcare system, as we all know, pandemic is going on. We have shortages of healthcare providers. And yes, there are refugees who are coming in this country and nurses and doctors, but we do not consider their credentials. And at the national level, it is important to support funding for refugees, resettlements, and social services, and call for President to set a higher goal for number of refugees who welcome in America. For each forward, the president is setting a presidential determinations, which is the which is the goal for the number of refugees that will be resettled in the fiscal year. And this number derived historically, in the history, during Trump regime. We all know that about 15,000. In 2020, President Biden increased that number by 125,000. That number of people, but with the number of people fleeing right now in their home countries, as you can see here, Ukrainians, Nigeria, and all other places around the world, waiting for years in refugee camps. There are still refugees who are waiting for years in the refugee camp in the hope of resettlement. We need this number to be on the original number, which is the 200,000 country. That's our norm, and that's our value as a country, especially as a state who welcome immigrants, the state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania have been a home for me. Coming to Pennsylvania was like a dream. Everything that I have dreamed of coming to reality. But the best part of me I love in Pennsylvania is telling my story. But telling my story, like Vivian said, it's not for me. It's about those across the globe. I know there's somebody who's sitting in the refugee camp. Or there's a child who's sitting somewhere thinking that their hope is gone. Because when we were in the refugee camp in Guinea, we were limited to so many things. Opportunities was like we couldn't find anywhere where to exploit our, to exploit our talents or our gifts. But today, Pennsylvania or the United States have given me that opportunity. Though my family did not come along with me. Happy I'm here. And I'm happy that I can tell my story. I'm happy that I can speak to somebody's soul, that you can make it. If I made it, you can make it. There's hope, and hold on to that. Thank you. Any question? I came on different kind of organizations. I came on different programs. I never came on resettlement. Like I said, my family didn't get resettlement. So I came on directly on diversity lottery visa. I don't know who know about it. Diversity lottery visa is basically like it's like a lottery that the United States government grants everybody around the world. You just play. Then you come. So with that, my case was a little different because I was just helped by family members and friends. Yeah. Yeah, I had again the diversity lottery visa is it's just like a lottery that you play, and if you have a sponsor here, if you have somebody, a family member that can sponsor you, and they will sponsor you, and you just go through the same process. You go to medical, and then you take the interview at the American Embassy, and if you pass the interview and you got everything right, and then they give you the visa to come. But the difference with that is that you come with your green card. You come, when I came, in less than 2 months, I had my green cards. And so that's the difference that's the difference between the Refugee Resettlement Program and the people who come in diversity lottery, because the Refugee Resettlement, you have to come and spend some time before applying for your green cards. Drinks. Um, um, kind of like I call it friends and our church members, and also like I said, my family, my aunt who brought me. She was my strong support system. Oh, when I came to the United States, I was about I was about 23.
Is it possible for congregants to use a mic? We can't hear them at all.
I was just, is the mic on? No.
Yes.
Okay. I was just talking about how, there's a commonality of experience, but also so much, we want to look at people, as you said, look at individuals, how much you have to offer, different experiences. For me, some of the best parts of my career have been the opportunity to work with people from different parts of the world that I would never have come across. I've never learned about their culture, never learned, what their stories, their history, and how much that enriched the experience. And so I feel very grateful for that.
Thank you.
Back home, are they?
Oh no! When I came, few years later, I decided that my family leave the camp because the camp life it was becoming so unbearable for them. They were no longer getting any kind of support from the United Nations, so I have to sponsor them to come to our country, Liberia. So they are now in Liberia. Any questions?
Are there any questions from the Zoom contingent?
You can just go ahead and unmute yourself if you want. Good. Wonderful.
Thank you so
hold on,
much
be
for
careful.
speaking.
There's a trip hazard going on.
Matilda had a very long day at work and now she has a class.
Oh my goodness. Well, then we are even more honored that you were able
Yes.
to join us tonight. So, and it's wonderful to meet you.
Our next speaker is our own Rebecca Kurzner. Pardon me? Oh, okay. Okay. Rebecca is the Senior Director of Grassroots Advocacy and Organizing at HIAS, where she leads the organization's grassroots advocacy and activism for refugees. Once an organization that primarily helped Jewish immigrants and refugees, HIAS now brings our Jewish values and 140 years of experience to the aid and protection of all refugee populations. Prior to joining HIAS, Rebecca was the Mid-Atlantic Regional Director at J Street. She's a former teacher in the School District of Philadelphia and holds a master's degree from the University of Pennsylvania. Here at Or Hadash, Rebecca is usually seen chasing after two little kids, walking through Rabbi Alanna's Zoom screen, or singing off key. No, that's not true. Anyway, she's a big fan of Or Hadash, and she's going to speak to us about how we can get involved to help refugees and also some of the current issues going on. Welcome, Rebecca.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to quickly look at the Zoom screen and ask if you guys can hear me. Okay, great. Okay. All right. So I'm a bit of a different type of speaker. I'm still, my heart is fluttering a little bit after hearing Matilda. That was just an incredible opportunity. Thank you, Vivian and Shelley, for enabling that. It is really an honor to be sitting up here in this part of the sanctuary. And you all were just kind of witness to, a moment of the parenting two kids while both having more than full-time jobs. So I appreciate your grace in that. So today, I address each of you. You're all either here surrounded by our Or Hadash community, or some of you are in your homes. Hopefully all of you are safe and warm with community, with your family, with a bed, a nice warm meal, a roof, knowing that you'll have those things tomorrow as well. These are things that everyone deserves and things that far too many people in the world actually have. This weekend, and for most congregations, last weekend is Refugee Shabbat. And Or Hadash joins 340 congregations in the US, Canada, and Europe, including in Poland, Lithuania, Peru, and Venezuela, who, despite a pandemic and everything else, have made it a priority to lift up the importance of welcoming and protecting the safety and the rights of refugees. For Jews, standing with refugees is an act of recognition, really, a recognition of the commonalities with our own stories, honoring our history, our mythic history as a people who wandered in search of safety for thousands of years, and our present. And it's upholding our values. It is an act of welcome, sometimes of courage, and always of love. For me, Refugee Shabbat honors my namesake, Grandma Becky, who arrived in the 1920s through Ellis Island, my grandpa, Jerry, who arrived from Cuba 20 years later, my wife's, you might have met her, my wife's Holocaust survivor family, and so many highest clients that I have met from around the world who have moved from one country to another in an act of bravery, resilience, and dignity. And so I thank you, all of you, for the choice to be part of that. So I'd like everyone to take just a minute and think of someone, a specific person who came to this country because they were unsafe where they were, who wanted a chance of safety and a better life for themselves or for their children. It could be someone that you are related to, someone in your community. It could be yourself, someone who came generations ago, or someone who came quite recently. And I want you to think about what they must have gone through to make the decision to leave everything behind and to take a dangerous journey into the unknown because it was the only chance at life. And I want you to just take a second and say their first name out loud or put it in the chat.
I would say unmute yourself and totally say it out loud.
So we're just going to hold that with us, especially thinking about what Matilda talked about, is thinking about each person as being an individual person. And I'm going to do exactly what Vivian asked and Shelley asked, which is to kind of give a big picture, but the big picture only matters within the context of the fact that it's about individuals and humanity of individuals. So I am here, I'm proud to be representing HIAS. We are an international refugee agency, the oldest refugee agency in the world. I am one of 1,800 staff members in almost 100 offices in 16 countries, providing aid to refugees. And I'll say personally, it's really an honor. I mean, it's really an honor to be associated with HIAS's historic work, helping generations of Jews come to the United States. We estimate, whether they know it or not, that we helped the families of nearly half of the current American Jewish community to immigrate to this country. And in some way, throughout the many waves of American Jewish immigration, HIAS had a huge role in what the Jewish community now looks like because of that. And I'm also very proud, maybe prouder, to be connected with our current work, serving refugees around the world, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, or nationality, which is based in our Jewish values. We are on the Greek island of Lesbos, serving refugees crossing the Mediterranean. We are in cities all along the US-Mexico border on both sides, the US and Mexico side. We are in 13 refugee camps in Chad, serving survivors of the Darfur genocide. We're in 9 countries in Latin America, serving people displaced from Venezuela and the Northern Triangle. Those are just examples. We like to say, this is our tagline, I'm sure you've heard it. We like to say that once we helped refugees because the refugees were Jewish, and now we help refugees because we are. Accordingly, HIAS has helped refugees, Jewish and not, from Ukraine specifically, for over 100 years. And so this past couple of weeks, we leapt into action as another refugee crisis rapidly unfolds in Ukraine. Today concludes just about a little over 2 weeks of watching, perhaps scrolling through Facebook, of CNN blaring in our living rooms as Russia's attack on Ukraine continues unceasingly. It's a devastating moment with a devastating humanitarian impact. As of today, more than 2.5 million people have fled Ukraine. It is a very rapid exodus in a very short amount of time. Of those, about half have fled to Poland, followed by Hungary, Moldova, Slovakia, Romania, and Russia. Even larger numbers of people are internally displaced within Ukraine. So, and by all accounts, the crisis in Ukraine is on track to become the largest forced displacement crisis in Europe since at least World War II. UNHCR, which is the UN's refugee agency, which Matilda referenced a few times, estimates that by the end of this, 4 million people will leave the country and up to 12 million will need humanitarian aid within Ukraine. Humanitarian needs in Ukraine were actually already acute before this crisis, with an estimated 1.6 million people who were either internally displaced from the eastern part of the country or who were refugees or asylum seekers or stateless people themselves from other parts of the world residing in Ukraine. With men aged 18 through 60 banned from leaving the country, the majority of those fleeing are women, children, and older people. Older people, people with disabilities, and children are especially vulnerable in this moment, and as are people who we call TCN's third country nationals in Ukraine, immigrants and refugees themselves who are not originally from Europe, perhaps do not have white skin, and who are not being offered the same level of protection at international borders. And on top of all that, I would say that at this moment in this week, the humanitarian needs within Ukraine are, far greater than the humanitarian needs across borders. The response and the concern from the world in this crisis is appropriately large. We are all shaken by this. We are all doing and giving what we can. HIAS has an on-the-ground operation providing aid, as many of our partner organizations do as well. And yet, this positive response to Ukraine, to people fleeing Ukraine, it may be appropriate, it may be absolutely appropriate, but it is not common. More than 2.5 million people have fled Ukraine, causing a humanitarian crisis of enormous proportions. And everyone understands why they had to flee, and everyone understands that they needed to flee. Their country has become unsafe. They're being shelled. Of course, they must leave it and cross into another country to escape that danger. This is obvious, but it should be that obvious for every refugee population. For any people living under an oppressive regime, Syrians, Afghans, Eritreans, for any people living in a highly dangerous country, Hondurans, Haitians, for anyone actively persecuted for their ethnicity, Rohingya, Uyghurs, for people that look like me, for people that do not, for people crossing borders far away from us, for people crossing our own border. We are all equally human, and these are human rights. Wow. The global refugee crisis, and Matilda said some of these numbers, but pardon me for repeating it. The global refugee crisis is now at 84 million people. That is almost 1 out of every 100 people in the world. And it's a rate of about 3 people every second. And while we sit at an important moment to help Ukrainian refugees, we are also in an important moment in other crises, which are not part of the news. Do you know what the primary difference is between me or any of us in this room and a refugee? Luck. Today, okay, so I'm going to give you a quiz, all right? So I don't like listening to myself talk, so I'm going to turn it to you for a second. Today there are so today, out of the 84 million people who are displaced, or 84 million refugees, 68% of them are from just 5 countries. So I'm just going to take a second and see if you can guess what are the 5 countries that are actually producing the most refugees right now. And I want to say,
And type them in the chat too. I'll read chatted answers on your behalf.
with apology, I also want to say these are numbers from before 2 weeks ago, so this doesn't include Ukraine. Syria, okay. I'm just going to repeat because of the Zoom. I'm just going to repeat what's said. Sudan. Afghanistan. Sorry, I didn't hear. Haiti. Doris. Okay, well, I know I appreciate the synagogue. It's because you guys got more answers correct than any other place I've spoken. But so the 5 countries that that are producing the most refugees, that are people are actively fleeing at the highest rates, are Syria 6.8 million, Venezuela 4.1 million, Afghanistan 2.6 million, South Sudan 2.2 million, and Myanmar 1.1 million. So part 2, 38% of all refugees are hosted by just 5 countries. What countries are hosting the most refugees? I heard Germany and Canada. Ukraine, France, US, Mexico, Australia. Okay, so these are actually, with one exception, these are actually not the right direction. 75% of refugees live in countries that neighbor the one they fled.
Like Chad and Turkey. Yeah.
Sure, or like Matilda was with her family in Guinea, right? So the countries that are hosting the most refugees are Turkey, 3.7 million, Colombia, 1.7 million, Uganda, 1.5 million, Pakistan, 1.4 million, and Germany, 1.2 million.
Yeah.
So this, I have to say, these numbers, when I hear those numbers, what it says to me is it puts in perspective how trivial some of the policy fights are in this country over whether we're going to accept 70,000 this year, or is it going to be 80,000? We have the capacity to be welcoming a lot more, and we're not doing this at the same level as a lot of other countries who have kind of less capacity to do it. So refugees, generally speaking, enter the country. Sorry, this is my last quiz question. That's not true. Second to last. Refugees generally enter the United States through 2 ways. These are 2 ways that you can enter the country because you are being persecuted or because you are fleeing. I'll clarify that because Matilda entered the country through a diversity lottery. That was not because she was fleeing. There's 2 ways you can enter the country because you are fleeing. And I'm curious if anyone knows what they are. Asylum is one. That's resettlement. Okay, so asylum and resettlement are the 2 ways that, broadly speaking, that you can enter the country as a refugee. So I'm going to start with resettlement. Resettlement through the U.S. Refugee Resettlement Program means that people are identified as being in particular need while they are abroad, and then they are screened by 5 government agencies. They are screened more than any other entrant to the United States, and brought to the United States, where they are welcomed into communities around the country. And then there is asylum, which is when people come to the United States, and then once they are here, once they've crossed onto US soil, then they apply to be able to stay because they fear to return to their home country. So that's the difference between the 2. In terms of resettlement, there have been some very significant developments in the past few years. The program went from welcoming close to 90,000 people in 2016 all the way down to 8,000 people last year, which was primarily a result of the Trump administration's commitment I'm going to say, priority of keeping refugees out of the country. And then the low numbers in the past 2 years specifically also had a great deal to do with COVID. The program really almost ground to a halt during the Trump years. And it's not like we at HIAS or at any of the refugee agencies can just flip a switch to turn the refugee resettlement program back on. Much has to be done to restore the program, to fund it, to staff it up, to reopen all the closed offices, to restart processing abroad, and to clear the massive backlogs. We are heading in an okay direction on that, I want to say. The Biden administration, as Matilda said, they met their campaign promise and committed to resettle 125,000 refugees this year through the resettlement program. We are very far from hitting those numbers, but the commitment is appreciated. This year, there was a huge effort around resettling Afghan refugees. I'm about to talk about that, but aside from that program, we only welcomed 4,000 refugees from anywhere else. So we have a lot to do to restart processing abroad. So the significant thing that happened this year was the historic resettlement of 76,000 Afghans following the fall of Kabul to the Taliban in August. It is just over 6 months since that moment. And finally, just a few weeks ago, every single one of those 76,000 people who were evacuated has moved off of the military bases where they were residing during that time and has been welcomed into a community. Finally, that has been accomplished. And it required a huge effort from the resettlement agencies, which were limping along after the Trump years, and from the wider community that played a huge role in doing that. It's important to know, I want to say that that was really a historic effort, and we should recognize the wins, but it's important to note that the work is not done. We still need to support our new Afghan neighbors, recognize that they're going to need support in the long term. They're going to need legal, permanent status in the country, which has not been given to most of them. And because of the last minute and chaotic way that the evacuations happened from Kabul, there are still many more people in Afghanistan who are in danger and for whom we must provide viable pathways to safety and who need assistance alongside many other vulnerable refugee populations from other countries. So there's a lot to do, but it was a very big year on that topic. Now on to Asylum, where the story becomes quite a bit darker. Okay, this is my last trivia question, and I apologize, but this is just, I'm going to try, see how this goes. I want to ask you if you know where and how one can legally claim asylum. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to read a few prompts, and you're going to give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, whether this is a way that you can legally claim asylum. Okay, at an official port of entry, such as a border crossing or an airport. Right. But yeah, okay, so I shouldn't say right. Zoom people, yes, that is a place that is a way you can claim asylum. Between ports of entry at the border, between ports of entry meaning not at an official port of entry, crossing as, I guess, someone who is not me would say, in an unauthorized way. Mixed results on that one. I'll tell you after this, hang on. Can you legally claim asylum once inside the United States, months after you arrived? Yes or no? Okay, we're almost completely split here, 50-50. Okay. You a lawyer or something? Rabbi? Okay. Okay. After I haven't yet told. Okay, so after being apprehended by immigration enforcement to avoid being deported, after you were apprehended by immigration enforcement to avoid being deported, can you legally claim asylum? And lastly, from outside the country before arriving to the United States. Okay, so we aside from the first one here, we're really split in terms of what. So let me tell you the correct answers. The correct answer is that all of these are ways that you can legally claim asylum, except for the last one. You have to be in the country. You have to have a foot on U.S. soil to claim asylum. I'll get to that. That's a really good question. So to be really clear here, as a reminder, you can claim asylum. I want you to leave this room and just spread this message to everyone that you ever meet. It is legal to claim asylum, whether you come to a border crossing, an official border crossing, and talk to a border guard there, or whether you cross in, crossing the Rio Grande River, swimming across, and you've put your foot on U.S. soil, and then you are apprehended by a border patrol agent. You can claim asylum, and that is legal too. You could be in the United States. You could be picked up by ICE, and you can say, I am afraid to be deported to my country, and you can claim asylum, and that is legal. It is not illegal to claim asylum. It is part of our U.S. law. It is part of international law that people should be able to find safety if they are going to be in danger if they were returned to their country. And it doesn't mean that they're automatically given asylum. It means that their case is heard. It means that they get to go to a court, ideally, right? I'm not saying that this is how it actually works. I'm saying that ideally, they're able to go to a court, they're able to make their case, they're able to tell their story and say that if you send me on a plane back to my country, I will be in serious danger. Please let me stay. And they're supposed to be allowed to stay. And it doesn't matter if you knew enough to approach at this border crossing or at this time, or if you were fleeing for your life and you just, crossed a river, and, it doesn't matter because that's a human right to be able to flee. So we can, first of all, also all those people that say, why didn't they apply before they came? Because it's literally not the definition. You have to be in the United States to apply for asylum. So I believe we can do this. I believe that it's achievable to have an asylum system that treats people fairly and compassionately. I believe that we can have a system that fairly adjudicates claims, that we can have a functioning bureaucratic process that would basically be a dream come true, but it's just about the opposite of what actually happens. We have a fundamentally flawed and unfair immigration process right now. But I want to talk about two particular policies that highlight that more than anything, and one of which Elisa just mentioned. So those two policies are both at the US-Mexico border, and one of them is called Title 42, and the other is called Remain in Mexico. Title 42 was instituted by the Trump administration 2 years ago, almost exactly 2 years ago, when the coronavirus crisis began. It was a misuse of several CDC regulations that are used to curb the spread of infectious disease. And what they did is they took these little lines saying that you can bar travel to curb infectious disease, and they turned it into a huge program to basically achieve a goal that the Trump administration had had for years, which was closing the border to anyone seeking asylum. It's now 2 years later. If someone approaches an official at a port of entry and says that they are in danger, and they say that they're fleeing for their lives, and to be clear, I am saying that they are doing it, quote unquote, the right way, the legal way, right? They're going up to the authority at a port of entry, and that person will turn them away. And they will not let them set foot on US soil. They will turn them away either back to Mexico or back to their home country under Title 42. The fact that people are being sent back into danger in this way is, my estimation and other people who are in my field, illegal by US and international law. And it's morally wrong. And yet it has been done almost 1 million times since the start of the Biden administration. I also want to note that for almost 2 years, public health experts have confirmed that this policy does nothing to stop the spread of coronavirus, particularly since the border is open to tourists, it's open to commerce, it's open for basically anyone crossing except for asylum seekers, the innocent, desperate people who need the safety and protection. With vaccines, hand washing, social distancing, masks, we can certainly have an asylum system that recognizes the threat of the spread of coronavirus. The second policy at the border that I wanted to highlight is called MPP, which is more colloquially known as Remain in Mexico. MPP stands for Migrant Protection Protocols, which is the worst misnomer. You know, it's not, sometimes my colleagues and I call it Migrant Persecution Protocols. MPP is similar to Title 42 in that it is used to deny the entry of asylum seekers at the US-Mexico border. In this program, people are forced to wait in Mexico while their immigration case proceeds in US immigration court. So they come into the United States just for a quick little bit while they're, you know, the fingerprints are taken, their names are written down, and they're sent back into Mexico to wait for their day in court. In Mexico, they have very limited access to US immigration attorneys who can represent them. In fact, only 4% of people in that program have legal representation. And because of that, many people are, for example, deported in absentia. For example, meaning that they receive a removal order just because they didn't show up for their court date. Maybe they didn't know what they were supposed to do. Maybe they couldn't read the document. They can't read English. So it's a horrifying program. To their credit, the Biden administration did end this policy in their first few months in office, but they were forced by a federal court to reinstate it. However, when they did so, when they reinstated it, they chose to add Haitians and other non-Spanish speaking countries in the Western Hemisphere to the groupings of people that are eligible to be put into that program. Remain in Mexico will be heard in the Supreme Court later this month, and it will be decided whether this program is legal and allowed to stay in place, and whether the Biden administration has to keep it in place. I'm not going to make a prediction. I don't know. So the effect of these policies and others as well is a humanitarian crisis at the border. We are very literally turning people back to their deaths, to danger. In some cases, people are being sent to literally to the country they fled. In some cases, they're waiting in Mexican border towns with the Tier 4 travel advisory, which is the same travel advisory for traveling, let's say, to Syria or Afghanistan or Iraq. And for this grouping of people, there have been thousands of reports of kidnapping and assault. There have been 200 flights to Haiti of people being deported straight back there from the US-Mexico border, returning to a country in political turmoil and experiencing the aftermath of natural disasters. And in far too many cases, people are forced to cross into this country between ports of entry, which others would call irregular or illegal immigration. They're dangerous journeys where people could be killed, and they're almost always extorted, paying $1,000 each to cartels to be able to cross the river. Why are they doing that? Because if they approach at an official port of entry, they'll be turned away. It is absurd that anyone has to do that, but they are forced to do so because they have no other options. In theory, they should be able to just cross a bridge and present themselves to a border authority. So, okay, let me try to wrap up here. So to be clear, there have been some real changes, some steps in the right direction. The judicial branch has overturned some case law that made it harder for people to apply for asylum on the basis of gender-based violence or domestic violence. It is now easier for asylum seekers to obtain work visas, and family detention, which is the practice of jailing parents and children together, has all but ended under the Biden administration. let me end by saying this. So why is it obvious that people should be able to flee Ukraine to Poland and that Poland should offer them protection, but it is not obvious that they should be able to flee a different country and go to a different country? It should be that including at our border, that people have the right to flee. So we have a great deal of work to do, and it is incredibly important time to be having this conversation because of the border, because of Afghanistan, because of Ukraine. And I want to thank you for inviting me to be part of it. This year we did what we could do. Last Shabbat, correct me if I'm wrong, Rabbi, we read about the communal effort, right, where each person brought what they could, each person to build the Mishkan. Yeah, that was right? Okay.
Sounds fair.
See, it rubs off. Okay, so
Sounds fair.
building,
Paying attention.
so building the Mishkan as a refugee people in the desert must have seemed like an insurmountable task for our refugee ancestors. And providing refugee protections for 84 million people, it often feels similarly insurmountable. But Judaism teaches us that it's not 84 million people. Judaism teaches us that it's one person and one person and one person and one person and one person. And that each person is an individual, and that each person is a reflection of the image of God, and that each person is a world unto herself. And so we will keep going every day, and it will take all of us, and it will be one person, and that we can do. So we can start tonight. We can start tonight by donating to the drives that Vivian mentioned at the beginning. And we can start tonight with some advocacy asks, which I was going to put, well, listen, I was going to put them in the chat.
Emailed out following Shabbat.
Well, sure, but I was going to put them in the chat, but they all can be found on the Highest website, highest.org/take-action. And there
Can
you'll
you
find
repeat the website one more time.
Oh, sorry. Highest.org/take-action.
Great.
But Alanna, I'll just send it to you, and you can also send it. Okay. All right. So there you'll find actions such as encouraging the Biden administration to resettle Ukrainian refugees with family ties in the United States, encouraging Congress to pass the Afghan Adjustment Act to give legal protections to Afghan refugees, and encouraging the Biden administration to end Title 42 at the US-Mexico border. And then after you sign those, we'll keep going. So thank you again.
I think there were some questions in conversation. Rich, do you still have a microphone? All right. You grab this hat, I'll grab this hat.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, you said about the Venezuelan refugees, and I should have thought about that. I was actually working on a project in Aruba, and I saw a Highest office there. And is that because of the Venezuelan refugees?
We are the only refugee agency on Aruba.
I was so surprised to see that there.
We're the only refugee agency, and it's because there are 10 flights a day from Venezuela to Aruba. And at a certain point, it stopped being vacationers and it started being refugees and from Venezuela. And so we noticed the gap, that there was no one there on the other side of those flights to help people. And we set up Highest Aruba, and we're the only refugee agency in Aruba.
I was wondering who is bringing the question about the stay in Mexico policy to the Supreme Court. Like who's bringing the suit so that the Supreme Court could hear it? Is it the Biden administration? I mean,
yeah, it was contested by it was contested in court. It was basically the Biden administration removed it, and a federal court said that they must put it back into place. And so the Biden administration has been appealing that all the way up. And they've asked for it to be expedited, which is why it's coming up so soon. Anyone on the Zoom? The Zoom people are very quiet. Okay. So I guess we can all wish for a Shabbat Shalom. That's what we really wish for that. And thank you for doing what you're doing to build a more just and compassionate world.
Thank you, Rebecca. I know we all learned so much. You really packed in a lot there. So I think one other thing besides, well, everybody should try to get at home on the highest website. There's just so much information.
Vivian, put the
For
mic
you.
next to your mouth.
Oh, yeah. There's often letters that are already pre-written and things like that. So the other thing I was going to add is that we all should join Jews for Refugees on Facebook. And often Rebecca is posting there. So thank you. And I think we're going to have some dessert, those of us who are here. You're welcome.
climate